What is up, guys? Lord Nick here, bringing you another riftbound related video. This video, guys, is going to be a matchup guide for Viktor into Kaisa. Originally, I was trying to make a matchup guide for all the top 4 matchups. I realized I don't know enough about the set and Annie matchups to kind of do that. I could do it on Kaisa and Master Yi, but then I was like, I could just go a little bit more in depth on the Kaisa matchup and kind of try to break it down. And we'll be basing it strictly off of deck lists and kind of theoreticals to a degree. There will be an actual gameplay video hopefully here soon. I will be playing some games with my buddy tomorrow, and if we could get the setup done correctly, we're going to be recording those games and getting some voiceover for those as well here in the near future. So if you guys end up liking this video, let me know, and we will make more guides like this. So jumping into it, the deck list we're going with is the deck list we were using last week. Big difference, we dropped the Ledros. I have this list here. The reason we dropped the Ledros, somebody in the comments let me know that I was at 41 cards, not 40. I will apologize now if my voice sounds like it is breaking or I'm running out of breath. I am kind of sick, so I'm still trying to overcome that. So if I do have to cough or something, I'll try to do that off the mic. But I'm just actually going to try to get through this video at this point, and try to do it in a way that I actually like it. But we'll be discussing the battlefields we use, our sideboard options, and then our generalized game plan and understanding Kaisa as a whole. Technically, game plan is after we understand Kaisa to a degree, but let's kind of jump into it, guys. Feel free to review this. If you want some more budget options on this, I've left some comments below, but I think if you don't have the Watchers, just toss in a couple Ledroses. If you don't have the Seals, that's where the deck kind of changes a lot. You have to get rid of Vanguard Captains and retreats, and then you just have a lot of options of what you can move into. Noxian Drummers, a fine replacement, and then you still have like 3 slots to mess around with. So feel free to let me know how you're doing it and how you're changing it, and maybe if you have a different view of what the deck should look like. I'd love to hear it. All right, guys. So going into the Kaisa matchup, let's talk about our battlefields. Our battlefield choices are Grove, Trifarian, Warcamp, and Obelisk. And I generally start off Grove first. I feel it is the most neutral camp into Kaisa. Yes, they are decent at holding, but so are we. So you know, if we can play the spot removal type game with them, then they're gonna run into a situation they're not actually building any forces. They're not getting any real advantages. And Grove will not give them that much of a card advantage. They will be fighting us for the Grove more often than not, and if they don't, then there is a chance that we get to hold there and get 1 extra card, and that 1 extra card can be enough for us to have just enough resources to actually, you know, get and eke out the game. Kaisa does have more draw power than us. Kaisa does have overall more low to the ground units that they spam than we do. But we consistently can make a unit every single turn. They have to use resources out of their hand. So do not play overly aggressive. Just trade efficiently in the early to mid game. Do not try to like force out a giant push early to just like hold on to a battleground or a battlefield. That is how you were just going to allow them to be able to be like, oh, Thousand Tail Watcher, or just start nuking your board with Hextech Rays and stuff. I also recommend that into games 2 and 3 that you cite in the singularities. I think that it is specifically very good for the Kaisa matchup, and there's an argument to get rid of 2 of the Call of the Weeks and put in 2 Vengeances, as I think that card is better, as it just allows us to kill a unit anywhere, and sometimes that is more valuable than just the, hey, I give you the option to kill a unit for cheaper, right? So when we are looking at Kaisa, we have to evaluate the strengths of the deck and the weaknesses of the deck, and I do this for every matchup that I go into, trying to understand them. What are Kaisa's biggest strengths? Well, Kaisa is the best deck at board control. They have the most consistent removal package out of every deck, as they have use of Falling Star, which is probably the best removal card in the game, as most things currently sit at that 3 might power level, outside of red, who get a lot of 4 and 5 mights. But pretty much every other color sits around 2 to 3, and thus Falling Star can effectively remove multiple units off the board every single time. On top of that, they get some of the most efficient units. Ravenbloom synergizes super well with all the spell slinging they like to do, as it gets more powerful and becomes one of the strongest 2-drops in the game when utilized with a package similar to Kaisa's. On top of that, they use Pouty Poro, which is just kind of a sticky early 2-drop. Something like Watchful Sentry that just replaces itself, so even though it's understated, it replaces itself. Same thing with Yordle, Lecturing Yordle, who does it on play, but is also a tank, which can be more relevant in certain matchups than many others. Reducing 1 might on your opponent means that 2 of their power then gets stuck on the Yordle, and then doesn't have enough to actually finish off your Darius. And then on to finish it out, they have the most efficient 2-drop in the game, and that is Noxian Hopeful. I know his cost is technically 4, but effectively in this deck and most decks that it gets played in, it is a 2-drop for 4 might. And then when you move into their mid-game units, Kaisa then has the ability to replace itself more than once by just being able to accelerate out and clear early status board states to get them an extra draw. You then have Darius, who is both a strong mid-game and late-game drop. If you play your second spell, he bumps up to 7, and then second card every turn, he bumps up to 7. Darius is just a very strong overall pushing unit, which just allows for their mid-game to be very good at effectively overpowering board states, as well as having a very solid removal sweep. And then you finish it out with the best late-game card in the game right now, probably, in Thousand Tail Watcher, and the fact that this card will reduce all the might of your opponent's units by 3, and just allows your units to swarm and take over as well. So one of the cool things that Kaisa gets to do that a lot of other people don't is they get to hold on to a lot of their 2-drop units and build them up early, take over with a lot of spells and mid-game units, and then finish it out with play Watcher, push guys, play Watcher, push guys. And that is just a very strong way to finish out and close games and then time warp their way to victory. So because of this, Kaisa does not have any easily discernible or definable weaknesses. It is strong in the early game as it has some of the best early and efficient early game units. It's strong in the mid game as it has some of the best mid game units and great removal package. And it is great in the late game as it has one of the best end games of Time Warp and Thousand Tail Watcher. So because of all of these things combined, this is the most complete package deck you can have in this current format. So how do we stop it? If this deck is so formidable, if this deck has this, why is it not winning tournaments? Well, part of that is the fact that there are technically a couple of things that this deck does lack in. It does lack in good resource generation. What I mean by that is that it does not innately draw off of everything it does. It does have 6 cards that it runs that just replace themselves immediately. Watchful Sentry has to replace itself on death, which means you get delayed gratification from it, and Kaisa does it on conquest, which means if you can kill the Kaisa before it does anything, it does not replace itself. So half of its suite that gives it draw does it instantly, which is really, really strong. And the other half takes delayed time. On top of that, if you play it out properly and are forcing them to have to trade units repeatedly, Kaisa does run out of units or spells. Whichever one they run out of first makes their job significantly more difficult. You know, many of them are moving to lists like this that run more units, but quite a few of them also have a heavier spell slinging package in the fact that sometimes they're not running the lecturing, they're not running a full 3 lecturing yordles, or they're not running or they're not running the 2 Pouty Poros, and they're running, you know, an extra couple of copies of like Void Seekers, or then maybe they have an extra Cathian Rain in the main, right? So some of these Kaisa decks do have some small tweaks to it, which can make the matchup a little bit less predictable, but most of the time there's something similar to this. They like to have a large suite of units as well with good that. So, sorry. Yeah, get that cough out. So how do you stop them from generating resources? What is the most effective way to stop them? Killing the Kaisa. Killing the Kaisa is one of the best ways to slow roll a Kaisa. Kill the Kaisa, kill the Darius on the swing. So holding Hidden Blades for situations like that, where you are forcing them to have to retreat their unit, right? Yeah, they get it back, but they still have to find a way to utilize it the next turn. And that is an additional 5 resources to develop the Darius they just did, or additional 5 resources to develop the Kaisa they just had. Ultimately, you are costing them more cards for them to save a unit than it is sometimes worth for them to do. So if you are effectively like, I'm going to kill your guy, and they retreat it, that tells you they don't have that many resources in their hand for guys that they can push that actually threaten us. Which means you can play it safe, pull all your guys back, and try to play an aggressive push-up game next. Or you could keep holding it and reinforcing those positions, right? One lost setup tempo for Kaisa makes their game plan way easier to be able to deal with and predictable to deal with. Also, bad Kaisa players are going to utilize too many resources in a turn trying to overextend and overpush their reach because they have such a strong deck that they think that there's no real option that you can have to stop them. So in situations where they decide to accelerate Kaisa on 5 and they don't have any resources remaining, and then you hidden blade the Kaisa, yes, they get to draw 2 cards, but you have now stopped all tempo that they have had. You just killed their Kaisa. They didn't get any actual value from the Kaisa conquering. They don't get to have recurable draw power because she's dead now. And on top of that, their retreats become less valuable because it's going to save or be used on units that they don't care nearly as much about. So ultimately, the best way to stop them is stop the cards that are the most important. So the Dariuses and the Kaisas, killing those things makes this deck significantly easier to deal with. So for early turns, one of the ways that I like to deal with it with Viktor is going to be building up more units on the board. So before I push into battlefields, I like to have a decent number of units that I keep in my base. I will push 1 recruit usually at a time out onto a battlefield that I can conquer. If I need to send 2 recruits to kill off a 2-drop unit, I might do that. Or if I need to get draw, I'll sacrifice a Watchful Sentry to get that type of value. We don't want to trade super heavily in the early game, and the early game is usually the first 2 to 3 turns. Usually by the 3rd or 4th turn is where we want to kind of move to a mid-game focus, which is where we will start more aggressively trading our units. This is because we want to deny as much value that the Kaisa or Darius might give them. Killing them off with the kill spells is great if we have them, but if we don't have that option, then we need to trade aggressively. We cannot allow them to build up additional pressure and additional power at these battlefields, because the more they put there, the harder it gets for us to kill them, unless we happen to top our 1-up Imperial Decree, right? Which leads more credence to wanting Imperial Decrees in this matchup, but I digress. Anyhow, some of the big things that we need to focus on in the mid-game is aggressive trading, so that we give up our kind of meh units to get rid of their good units, and then start defending a singular location. You don't want to split your resources between 2. Yes, it can potentially get us there faster, and in a super early game scenario where we can get out 2 recruits on like our first turn because we're going 2nd, and Kaisa doesn't have a unit on turn 1, then yeah, we can push and take both, because losing 2 little recruits may not be that devastating for us, but it does give us 2 points, and if one of them somehow lives, we gain another point. 3 points is pretty good for us in the early game. So ultimately, you only take advantage of it when the Kaisa shows that they don't really have anything. On top of that, if either of those units die to a Hextech Ray, hey, cool, we've eaten one of the removal sources that would be dealing with one of our actually more meaningful units. So the last thing you kind of need to keep in mind is saving removal for the actual threats. Too often, I see people actively trying to use the removal to hold on to a battlefield that they have no reason to hold on to. Yeah, losing a 1 might unit might stink because you don't have that much else on the field, but ultimately, if you were trying to then kill a Pouty Poro with a hidden blade, you've just wasted a hidden blade on a unit that we can easily send 2 recruits into to trade with, opposed to just holding it and killing the thing that matters, like Kaisa. So ultimately, save your removal for the units that matter, and build up as big of a board as you can early, and then only start playing the game like aggressively in the mid game, and then by the late game we should have decent answers in the forms of, you know, game 1 it would be Thousand Tales or Imperial Decrees or Grand Stratagem, and then by game 2 we also have Singularities. On top of that, I think Riptide Rex is a super undervalued card in this matchup. I think that he, after we lose a battlefield to a Kaisa or a Darius that we weren't able to kill, I prefer it to be a Darius so they don't get extra advantage. We just Riptide Rex, play it the next turn. If they don't have a retreat, they just lost a Darius, and we have a Rex that's sitting in our back line, and it's like, if they want a Falling Star to kill him, great, but if we have our own retreat to save our Rex, then our Rex comes back, we get one of the resources back, and we're going to nuke the guy that they just, the next guy that they play at a battlefield. Seems pretty good to me. So ultimately, I would say save your resources, kill the things that are matterful. We have a lot of good mid to late game units, so just feel free to play it slow. Don't have to play it that fast, and just take your time and learn what you're playing into. And just like that, you're going to find yourself doing better into Kaisa, guys. So hopefully this quick little guide was enough to give you guys some pointers in the matchup. It's not a perfect breakdown. It's not going to be perfect for every scenario. And without actual gameplay, it's a little bit difficult for me to showcase everything that I mean. But until the next video, guys, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye, guys.